Have you ever seen a child punished for sitting where she belongs? She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stood there, 5 years old, cheeks burning, her teddy bear ripped from her arms, and her drawing for Daddy torn in two. No one spoke. Not one adult moved. But what they didn't know was that the bracelet on her wrist had just blinked white. And somewhere across the ocean, her father, a man who doesn't raise his voice, only systems, was already watching. This wasn't just a flight. This was a test. And she was the one they shouldn't have touched. The first-class cabin smelled of citrus and polished leather. Ella Monroe, 5 years old, with her tight blonde curls tied into 2 bouncy puffs, stepped gently into the aisle. She wore a pale blue dress with daisies, her grip tight around a Burberry teddy bear. Grace Warren, the woman escorting her, offered a warm smile as they reached seat 4D. "Right here, sweetheart," Grace said, helping Ella into her oversized seat. The child beamed and set her bear beside her. She pulled out a crumpled drawing of a plane with the words, "For Daddy," written in red crayon. Before Ella could say another word, Natalie Henson arrived. "What is this?" Natalie's voice cut through the hum of the cabin. "Children under 7 are not permitted in this cabin unless medically cleared." Grace stood, calmly. "She has clearance. I submitted the documentation yesterday." "She said her daddy is Logan Monroe," Natalie snapped, loud enough for half the cabin to hear. "Cute lie. Maybe next time Coach will believe it." Ella looked up, big blue eyes wide. "But he is my—" The slap cracked across her cheek before the sentence finished. Passengers froze. Forks halted mid-air. A man lowered his newspaper slowly. No one moved. Ella didn't cry. Her curls trembled, her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. The red crayon drawing drifted to the floor like a feather and landed at Natalie's feet. Then she stepped on it. "That'll teach you not to lie," Natalie muttered. Gasps fluttered down the aisle like wind through leaves, but no one stood up. Grace's hand flew to Ella's shoulder, but her eyes didn't leave Natalie. Ella still didn't cry. Natalie leaned over and snatched the bear from the seat. "You don't need this either," she hissed, and turned sharply, disappearing toward the front of the plane. A few seconds later, the sound of the toilet flushing echoed faintly down the aisle. Ella blinked. Silence stretched thick and ugly. One passenger cleared his throat. Another woman whispered, "That child said Monroe? He owns the airline." A man across the aisle scoffed. "Yeah, right. All kids say stuff like that." In seat 3A, an elderly man muttered, "Brat needed discipline. Good on the flight crew." Ella's hand moved to her cheek, not from pain, but to cover something blinking beneath her sleeve. No one saw. No one cared to, except Grace. She knelt, her voice trembling. "Ella, sweetheart, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Ella looked at her with the kind of stillness no child should ever wear. "She stepped on my daddy's plane." Grace bit her lip. And somewhere in Ella's silence, something powerful had already begun. Ella stayed still, her tiny frame swallowed by the first-class seat. Her curls, now slightly flattened on one side from Natalie's strike, shifted gently as the air vent blew overhead. Grace sat beside her, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Across the aisle, passengers resumed their activities with forced casualness, as if erasing what had just happened could absolve their silence. A few seats up, a gray-haired man adjusted his cufflinks. His suit was charcoal, crisp, his shoes polished like mirrors. He leaned slightly toward his seatmate, a younger woman scrolling on her tablet. "She deserved that," he said quietly. "This is why children shouldn't be allowed in first class. It's not a daycare." Grace heard it, her jaw tensed. Ella didn't blink. She simply stared at her lap where her drawing used to be. The man glanced back at Ella, his expression unreadable. Then he gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Not to her, but to himself. Like a man approving a trade, not a punishment. For a moment, it looked like he might say something kind. offer a tissue, a word, a crumb of humanity. But instead, he turned and tapped his smartwatch. The screen briefly glowed with the logo of a major investment firm. Beneath it, Ether Air Holdings. Grace's breath caught. She recognized that logo. That man wasn't just a passenger. He was an investor, one of the silent hands that pulled strings behind the scenes. Ella finally moved. She picked up the strap of her small backpack and slowly unzipped it. Her fingers fished around until they found something soft. Her backup teddy. It wasn't Burberry. It didn't even have both button eyes, but it was enough. She hugged it close and whispered, "My bear knows I didn't lie." Grace lowered her head, fighting tears. "Of course you didn't," she said, her voice tight. "You told the truth, sweetheart." Ella nodded once, but her face stayed still. The light from the window caught her cheek, revealing the faint pink imprint of Natalie's hand. Some passengers looked, but only briefly, like glancing at a car wreck and quickly turning away, afraid to see too much. The man across the aisle, the investor, opened his laptop. He began typing an email titled, "Incident on Flight 714, Optics Risk Minimal." He paused, looked up at Ella. She looked back, and in that shared glance, one innocent, one calculating, the truth was clear. He didn't see a child. He saw a variable. Ella hugged her bear tighter and said nothing. Somewhere in row 6, a soft chime beeped from a smartphone. The man holding it, mid-30s, blazer draped over a graphic tee, glanced around quickly. His eyes darted from the aisle to the seat back. Then he whispered to the woman beside him, "I got it." He tapped the screen. A video played silently. Natalie's hand raised, the slap, the drawing falling, the frozen passengers. He caught it all, crisp, undeniable. "Send it," the woman hissed. But he didn't. He leaned back and stared at the screen. Then his eyes shifted, toward the front of the cabin. Natalie stood near the galley, back turned, but her posture radiated control. The man hesitated, then stood up, phone still in hand. As he passed Natalie, she looked up. Their eyes locked. He gave a small, awkward smile. She didn't return it. Instead, in a voice low and deadly calm, she said, "Would be a shame if someone violated FAA recording policies, wouldn't it?" He paused. "I was just enjoying the flight, I'm sure," Natalie interrupted smoothly. "Be careful not to let one child's drama ruin that." He didn't respond. Back in his seat, he scrolled to the video. His thumb hovered over the send icon. Then, slowly slid left. Delete. Gone. Ella didn't see it, but Grace did. She saw the phone, the hesitation, the fear, and the cowardice. Grace turned back to Ella, smoothing the child's curls with trembling hands. "You okay?" she asked gently. Ella nodded. "People are scared of her." Grace paused, then leaned in, her voice barely audible. "Sweetheart, don't be scared, but don't trust anyone either." Ella blinked. "Not even the nice ones?" "Especially not the nice ones," Grace whispered. A few rows back, a woman whispered to her husband, "She's trouble. That girl. Something about her feels staged." The man replied, "Hope we don't get delayed over this." Another muttered, "Why is it always the ones with money that cause the most drama?" Grace caught the words. So did Ella. She didn't react. Not with tears, not with anger. She simply reached into her backpack, pulled out a broken crayon, and quietly drew on the back of a napkin. One line, a small window, and a bear. Across the cabin, passengers whispered, screens flickered, and silence returned. Thicker now, sharp-edged and suspicious. What no one realized was that silence had weight, and Ella had learned how to carry it. The hum of the engines was steady, soothing in a way that felt cruel. Ella sat quietly, her knees pulled up into the seat, arms wrapped around the patched teddy bear. Grace watched her, eyes flicking occasionally to the cabin where Natalie moved like nothing had happened, checking trays, offering drinks, smiling too wide. Then it happened. A soft click from under Ella's sleeve. Grace leaned in. The bracelet, matte silver, embedded with a faint blue shimmer, had blinked. Once, then again. Then it held. A soft, steady white light pulsed just beneath the surface. Grace's breath caught. "It's triggering," she whispered. Ella looked down at her wrist. "Is that Daddy's system?" Grace nodded. "It means it's watching now." She exhaled in relief. Maybe this was it. The line of hope that would unravel the silence. The moment everything changed. Across the ocean, the air in Ether Air headquarters remained undisturbed. In a glass tower nestled in the heart of Zurich, Logan Monroe sat in a closed-door policy meeting with UN transport delegates. His tablet screen showed graphs, projected numbers, global ethics benchmarks. No alerts, no warnings, nothing. A soft chime from his assistant's phone pulled no attention. It wasn't for him. Inside the plane, Grace pulled out her own device. Nothing. No system pings. No acknowledgement. No confirmation. The bracelet blinked again. Steady, calm, but silent. She tapped into the admin console. A buffering circle spun for a second. Then the message appeared in gray. Status, offline. Sentinel queue and hold state. Connection unstable. Grace's heart sank. "No," she breathed. Ella looked up. "It's not working?" Grace didn't answer. Ella's eyes drifted back to the window, to the soft clouds rolling like forgotten promises. The white light on her wrist still glowed, as if trying, reaching, believing. But it wasn't enough. Not this time. Across the aisle, the investor from earlier glanced toward Ella's seat. His expression didn't change, but he saw the light and smiled faintly. Another passenger whispered, "Is that a toy?" "No idea," someone muttered. "Probably one of those rich kid trackers." In row 5, a boy stared at Ella's wrist like it held magic. But when nothing happened, he turned back to his movie. The moment passed. The light held. But the system didn't. Zurich, 3:42 p.m. Logan Monroe tapped his stylus against the edge of the glass table. The ethics presentation had moved to questions, and he was half listening, eyes scanning the live integrity metrics on his dashboard. All green, all quiet. Too quiet. Across the table, his chief data officer shifted in her seat and whispered, "Minor lag from Geneva server. Probably cloud routing." Logan nodded, unconcerned. The Air Sentinel network had redundancies across 3 continents. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that 20 minutes earlier, a targeted cyber attack had hit their Pacific backup node. Not enough to crash the system, just enough to stall a queue, just enough to break the one connection that mattered. Flight 714's Sentinel relay was in limbo, and Ella Monroe was flying blind. On the 35th floor, in a darkened IT command room, a man named Theo Black frowned at the screen. He was in his 50s, quiet, nondescript, the kind of man who blended into hallways. But his ID badge glowed with executive override clearance. He read the screen again. Inbound signal, Class Alpha Minor. Bracelet ID, Natch EM7198. Status, no match, not received. His jaw tightened. Years ago, Theo had been 11 when he was bumped from first class with his grandmother. They told him it was policy, that his seat had been double booked. But he remembered the shame, the eyes, the tone. He'd built his career to make sure that shame never reached another child. And now, watching Ella's signal pulse into nowhere, he knew. The system wasn't broken. It had been blocked, not officially, not overtly, but enough. He reached into his drawer and pulled out a slim, unauthorized console. Old school, hardwired. Analog override. He typed a single string of code. Send Manual. Ping. Internal. A small button blinked blue. He pressed it. Back on the plane, Ella's bracelet flickered white, then briefly shimmered with a soft amber halo. Grace saw it. Her breath caught. "Ella," she whispered. "Someone's listening." Ella didn't speak. She just held her bear tighter. Zurich. Logan's tablet buzzed. A single alert appeared. Echo trigger active. Signal restored via shadow relay. His stylus stopped tapping. He stared. His daughter's ID blinked on screen. Stress spikes. Elevated heart rate. Facial recognition match. Visible distress. Logan stood. "Cancel the next session," he said quietly, "and get me secure access to Flight 744's internal relay. Now." On board, the cabin lights hummed faintly. Nothing obvious had changed. But in a room no one could see, someone had decided silence wasn't safe anymore. The lights didn't flicker. The engines didn't shift. To anyone seated in the first-class cabin of Flight 714, nothing appeared different. And yet, everything had changed. Far above the cloud line, embedded deep within the aircraft's communications hub, a hidden protocol, known to only 6 executives in the world, had just come online. Protocol Echo, silent observation mode, activated. No warning, no chime, no signal, just a flicker, invisible to the human eye, as every camera, every microphone, every biometric reader began recording in high resolution and transmitting in real time to Ether Air's ethics oversight room in Zurich. Grace didn't know. Not yet. But Theo Black did. In the Zurich operations hub, he watched as each passenger's ID locked onto the live board. Names, seats, stress metrics, voice samples, all updating per second. Cabin crew behavior, facial micro-expressions, posture shifts, flagged and color-coded. At the top of the list, Henson, Natalie. Anomalous aggression spike, pending review. And beside her, Subject 4D, Ella Monroe, protected minor, active monitoring. On the plane, Natalie offered champagne to a couple in 2A with a rehearsed smile. The woman laughed at something her husband said. Natalie chuckled politely, masking the tremor in her wrist. In her earpiece, there was only static. She didn't know the system had muted internal channels. She didn't know her every word was now cataloged. Just a few rows back, the man who had deleted the video earlier leaned toward his wife. "Maybe we overreacted. That kid's just sitting there." The wife shrugged. If she was really Monroe's kid, the plane would have stopped mid-air. They laughed. The camera above their heads recorded it all. Grace watched Ella, who hadn't moved in 20 minutes. Her eyes stayed fixed on the tray table, where her broken crayon sat like a line never finished. Then, for the first time, she whispered, "Are they watching?" Grace blinked. "What do you mean?" Ella tilted her wrist, showing the bracelet. The amber glow had dimmed now, replaced by a soft, pulsing white. "It's not blinking anymore," Ella said. "It's breathing." Grace didn't answer. She didn't need to. In Zurich, Logan stood silently in the observation room, watching multiple feeds. He didn't speak, didn't ask for analysis, just observed. And when he saw Natalie lean into Ella's row, fake smile intact, he said 4 words into the room. "Let the system run. Cabin 1A." A woman reached for her wine. "It's quiet," she said. Her partner nodded. "Too quiet." They weren't wrong, but they had no idea why. The hum in the cabin had settled into a strange, artificial calm. It wasn't peaceful. It was poised, as if the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for something that hadn't yet arrived. Ella sat still, her bear cradled gently in her arms, her small legs dangling over the edge of the seat. The bracelet on her wrist continued its soft pulse. White, steady, unspoken. Grace sat beside her, her posture tense but composed. Every now and then, she glanced at Natalie, who still floated up and down the aisle with robotic elegance. In row 3C, The elderly investor adjusted his glasses and tilted his head toward Ella. He squinted, almost thoughtfully, then muttered to the woman beside him, "That girl. Monroe, isn't it?" The woman looked up from her tablet. "What?" He leaned in, louder this time. "The child. She said her name was Monroe. She looks like him, doesn't she? Logan Monroe's kid." The sound didn't echo, but it carried. Row by row, necks turned. Grace looked up first, eyes narrowed. Ella looked at no one. In row 2A, a woman in a silk scarf blinked, then slowly turned to her husband. "She said that name earlier," she whispered. "I thought it was just a tantrum thing, but what if it wasn't?" "Wait," said someone in 4C, leaning over the aisle. "Did she really say she was Logan Monroe's daughter?" The whisper became ripple. The ripple became buzz. A quiet murmur moved across the cabin like smoke slipping beneath a door. And then, silence. All eyes turned. Natalie froze mid-step, tray of water bottles still in hand. Her face didn't move, but her knuckles whitened around the metal edge. She scanned the cabin. "Let's not start rumors," she said quickly. "There's no verification of that." "Is it true?" a man asked directly, staring at Grace. "Is that the CEO's daughter?" Grace opened her mouth, closed it. Ella looked up, just for a second. Her lips parted, but she said nothing. Instead, she reached into her backpack, pulled out the folded napkin she'd drawn on, and placed it gently on the tray table. A single plane, drawn in shaky red crayon, with the words, "For Daddy," in the corner. No one needed confirmation after that. They knew. Natalie knew. Her hand trembled. The tray shook slightly. The investor's smile vanished. Someone in the back let out a soft, "Oh my God." Grace finally stood, not to yell, not to threaten, just to place her hand protectively on Ella's shoulder. "Whatever you thought this flight was," she said calmly, "it isn't anymore." Natalie swallowed hard. For the first time in the flight, her posture broke. She turned, quietly disappearing into the galley. In her wake, the cabin was no longer just still. It was shifting. In the cockpit, Captain Luis Ortega furrowed his brow as a silent override locked into the console. No chime, no flashing red lights. Just a single line of green text across the top of the navigation display. Flight path adjusted. Executive override confirmed. Destination, ZRH. Zurich? He blinked. That wasn't their scheduled landing. But he knew better than to question a Tier 0 executive override. It wasn't a system bug. It was a command. His co-pilot glanced over. "That can't be standard routing." Luis exhaled slowly. "It's not, but it's final." Behind them, the radio feed hissed quietly. No further details. Just instructions. Maintain cabin control. Do not announce deviation. Back in the cabin, seatback monitors blinked. The entertainment screens froze for 2 full seconds, then flickered to a new message. Real-time oversight active. All interactions logged. The message repeated once in a calm, robotic tone, then disappeared. Passengers straightened in their seats. "What does that mean?" someone asked. "Is this a security drill?" another whispered. A woman clutched her purse tighter. "Are we being watched?" The buzz spread fast. Tension rose not with noise, but with uncertainty. Natalie stepped out of the galley, forcing a smile. "Minor system update," she announced, voice even. "Please remain calm. Everything is functioning normally," but her voice cracked on the word normally. In row 4, Grace leaned toward Ella and gently tucked a loose curl behind the girl's ear. "They're changing the route," she whispered. "I think they're bringing us home." Ella looked up at her. "Zurich?" Grace nodded. "Your daddy's city." Ella's fingers gripped her bear tighter. Grace placed a hand over hers and added softly, "Your bear might not come back, baby, but justice is on its way." Ella didn't respond, but her eyes, blue, sharp, unflinching, never left the monitor as the cabin lights dimmed a half shade. No one clapped, No one celebrated. But the air had changed, like a storm gathering. Not loud yet, but certain. Across the aisle, the investor shifted in his seat, tapping furiously at his phone. The signal held no bars. Up front, Natalie's earpiece remained silent. She touched it, tapped again. Nothing. Her face paled. She turned toward the cockpit, then hesitated. For the first time, she looked like she didn't know where to stand, because the system she thought she understood had outgrown her. Natalie Henson's hands shook just slightly as she closed the galley curtain behind her. The cabin was quiet, but it was the wrong kind of quiet. Too uniform, too aware. She tapped her earpiece again. Still no response. She reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out her personal phone, shielded it behind a tray cart, and unlocked it with her thumb. Her fingers danced across the screen as she navigated to a private contact. David Trask, VP Crew Operations. David had always had her back. He was the one who fast-tracked her promotion after that incident in Madrid. The one who said things like, "You're tough. That's what this company needs." She hit call. 3 rings. 4. On the 5th, someone answered, but it wasn't David. "This is internal dispatch," said a calm voice. "The extension you're trying to reach is no longer active." Natalie blinked. "Excuse me? I'm trying to reach David Trask. It's urgent." A short pause. "Mr. Trask is no longer with Etherair as of this morning. His access has been revoked. For follow-up, contact Ethics Oversight." Natalie's throat tightened. "What?" The line clicked off. She stared at the screen in disbelief. The man who'd always protected her, gone. Not transferred, not promoted. Gone. She tried texting. "David, please. I need help. I think something's happening on Flight 714. They know." The message never went through. Message failed. A cold sweat broke along her spine. She stumbled to the side of the galley and leaned against the counter. She tried a second contact. Someone in Union Advisory. No response. Third contact. HR Liaison. Blocked. She scrolled through her call history, desperate, before landing on an old risky number. Someone in PR crisis containment. She hesitated. Then she stopped. Because she realized Logan Monroe didn't need crisis containment. He was the crisis. And now, he was watching. From somewhere behind the curtain, she heard a soft ding from the monitors. The cabin lights dimmed once more, and a message appeared again. "All interactions under executive review. Oversight active." Natalie slowly emerged back into the aisle. The smiles were gone. Passengers didn't look away anymore. They stared. Some whispered. Someone pulled out their phone. She walked forward, forcing her face into neutrality. She passed row 4. Grace didn't flinch. Ella didn't move. But as Natalie passed, she felt it. That strange pressure. The shift. The weight of what she no longer controlled. She turned, facing the passengers, and realized, for the first time, she wasn't in charge of the narrative. She was part of the evidence. The plane cruised in perfect stillness, but the silence inside was louder than any turbulence. Passengers sat rigid, barely breathing. The cabin lights, now dimmed to a soft amber hue, bathed everything in a glow that felt almost sacred. Screens stayed black. No films, no maps. Just that chilling line etched into every display. All interactions under executive review. Oversight active. Natalie had retreated to the front, her presence shrinking by the second. She no longer walked with her usual confidence. Her shoes barely made sound against the aisle. But in row 4D, something else was shifting. Ella sat upright now, still holding her bear. Her curls were slightly undone, one ribbon slipping loose near her cheek. Grace had been watching her for several minutes, saying nothing, just witnessing. Then Ella moved. She unzipped her backpack with slow, deliberate fingers, pulled out a sheet of paper, creased, rumpled, nearly torn in two, and carefully unfolded it. Not a drawing, Not a letter. A document. She laid it gently on the tray table, smoothing it as best she could. At first, no one understood what it was. Then a woman in 3C leaned closer and gasped, Is that the charter?" Grace nodded slowly. "The Passenger Ethics Accord, version 2.0. At the bottom of the page, beneath clauses on dignity, child protection, and zero tolerance for physical misconduct, was a signature. Logan Monroe, founder and CEO, Ether Air. A collective breath left the cabin. Someone in the back muttered, "She brought the charter." Another passenger, a young man in business attire, blinked hard. His voice cracked. My kid got moved from first class last year because she cried during takeoff." In 2B, an older woman with silver hair covered her mouth, tears welling. "And we all let this happen," she whispered. No one spoke loudly, because they didn't need to. The girl had said nothing. Not when she was struck. Not when her bear was taken. Not when her art was torn or her name questioned. She hadn't yelled, hadn't screamed. But now, with one wrinkled page, she was louder than all of them. Natalie peeked from the galley and saw the paper, and froze. Her face paled. She recognized that page. She'd signed a training compliance form based on it 3 months ago, after brushing it off as symbolic fluff. Now it stared back at her like a mirror. Ella didn't look at Natalie. She didn't look at anyone. She just tapped the corner of the document with her finger and waited. The descent into Zurich began with no fanfare, no captain's voice over the speaker, no cheery announcement about weather or local time. Just a soft ding and a message on the cabin monitors. "Prepare for early disembarkation. Crew remain seated. Passenger Monroe to remain on board." Natalie's eyes widened. She looked around, expecting confusion, maybe protest. But the cabin stayed still. Everyone understood. A moment later, her earpiece buzzed. Quiet this time, almost apologetic. "Lead Attendant Natalie Henson. You are to disembark immediately upon gate arrival. Do not interact with passenger 4D. Remain compliant." Her hands began to shake. She turned toward the cockpit, seeking some form of explanation, maybe support. But the captain didn't look her way. He'd flown 20 years. He knew what a silent recall meant. As the wheels touched down with a soft thud, the cabin didn't erupt in the usual shuffle of bags and buckles. No one stood. Instead, the seatbelt sign stayed lit. And then a single chime played, lower than usual, followed by a final message on every screen. "Ether Air Passenger Ethics Protocol 4.91 in effect. Compliance requested." Outside the window, 4 unmarked black SUVs waited near the jet bridge. Not police, not military. Something quieter. Inside the plane, 2 men in sleek gray uniforms entered. No weapons, just tablets. They stopped at the front, scanned the cabin, and then one of them spoke. Not loudly, not coldly. "Ms. Henson, please step forward." Natalie didn't move at first. Then, with trembling hands, she straightened her blazer, fixed her hair, and stepped out from the galley. No one clapped, no one sneered. They just watched. She walked down the aisle, and with every step, it was as if gravity shifted. She passed row 2, then row 3. And as she approached row 4, she slowed. Ella didn't look at her, didn't blink, just sat quietly, fingers still resting on the corner of the charter. Grace looked up, not with hatred, but with something deeper, finality. Natalie opened her mouth, closed it, then continued past. No one said a word. Until she reached the end of the aisle. Then, something remarkable happened. Row by row, the passengers stood. Not for Natalie, but for Ella. Like an instinct, like a chain reaction. One by one, the cabin rose in silence, creating a path, an aisle of acknowledgement. Natalie exited the aircraft into the waiting arms of oversight officers. No cuffs, no spotlight, but every step was watched, not just by systems, by people. She had entered the flight as someone with power. She left it as someone who had been seen. Back inside, Ella still hadn't spoken. But now the silence was no longer hers to carry alone. 1 year later. At Ether Air's Zurich headquarters, inside a glass-paneled atrium reserved for the airline's most defining moments, a new display had been added. It wasn't large. No spotlight. No velvet rope. Just a small, elegant pedestal with a protective glass case. Inside it sat a worn Burberry teddy bear, stitched carefully, one ear slightly off-center where it had been mended by hand. Its fur still bore the faint crease from where it had once been crushed. Beside the bear, folded neatly, was the wrinkled page Ella had placed on the tray table that day. The Passenger Ethics Accord, signed by Logan Monroe himself. And beneath them both, etched into a brushed steel plaque, were 6 simple words. Her silence changed everything. They called it the Ella Protocol now. What began as a silent override had become a global standard. Within 6 months of Flight 714's emergency landing, 21 airlines across 4 continents had voluntarily adopted the new passenger dignity mandate. Within a year, the International Aviation Council made it mandatory. The protocol included real-time oversight of all protected passengers, zero tolerance for physical or verbal misconduct, cabin-level ethics, triggers tied to biometric indicators, required retraining for all crew in emotional intelligence and child safety. But what changed more than policy was perception. Passengers no longer rolled their eyes at crying toddlers. Flight attendants began each trip with a renewed awareness of presence and power. Airports installed silent report stations. The industry had shifted, not because of outrage, but because of one child who never raised her voice. At home, Ella didn't like being called a symbol. She still kept to herself. She still hugged her repaired bear when she slept. And though she rarely spoke about that flight, she had drawn a new picture. A plane flying through a sky filled not with clouds, but with people holding hands, tiny hearts drawn in between. It hung in Logan's office, framed above the original charter. Visitors always asked about it. He never answered directly. He didn't need to. On the anniversary of Flight 714, a quiet ceremony was held at Ether Air HQ. No press, no stage, just employees, families, and a few who had been on that flight. Grace was there. So was the investor from 3C. He hadn't smiled since. A bell chimed gently at noon, and everyone turned toward the display case. Ella, now 6, stood beside her father. He didn't nudge her to speak. He just held her hand. She looked up at the bear, then turned to the crowd. And this time, just once, she whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, "Thank you for listening." The room held its breath, not because of what she said, but because they finally understood. They should have been listening all along.